Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Reverend Jose Lopez Chapa, and I am a pastor with the Baltimore Presbytery. Welcome to our first ever podcast. We are excited to launch this new endeavor. This podcast, we hope, will help us explore some different themes and topics and areas of interest for us throughout our presbytery and beyond. And so today for our inaugural podcast, we are excited to have the Reverend Jennifer DiFrancesco. Now, did I pronounce the last name correct, Jennifer?
You totally nailed it.
Yes.
I'm so impressed with you, Jose.
Thank you. I guess it might be the Spanish language kind of influence there. So, and do you go by Jen? Is that fair?
I totally do. Or whatever else you want to call me, because usually I've been called everything.
Oh, it's a good thing because you are a pastor, a mother, a doctor of ministry student, an advocate for the Baltimore City schools. Let's see, you have a husband who is a tax accountant, and two daughters, ages 8 and 10, and a 2-year-old, or I guess by now they're probably older.
So they all grew up. Isn't that amazing how I've not updated anything about who I am or my profile? Luckily my husband is still my husband and he's still a CPA. Awesome. But my kids actually grew. Can you believe it?
That's amazing.
I watered them and treated them well. And they've grown. So I now have a 15-year-old.
Oh my goodness.
I know, right? And a 14-year-old.
Oh,
and
wow.
A 7-year-old.
Oh my goodness. So I've got 2 young ones. So, I look forward to that time, but I'm also a little scared of that time when they get to be that teenage age and those, yeah. So you have 3 children.
I do.
And you are a pastor, an advocate for so many things, and you try to find the balance in this world between faith and work and family and kids and fun and passion and all that kind of good stuff. Is that fair to say?
That is very fair to say. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, Jen, we're so delighted to have you. I personally am so grateful to you for being our first guest, and hopefully one of many more guests as this podcast evolves. As I mentioned, the idea is to kind of shed light on different topics and themes. And you and I, since I entered this presbytery now almost a couple of years ago, we've had a couple of conversations, and I find the work that you do is very fascinating. Tell us about anything, tell us more about yourself. What got you into ministry, and what's that road been like, and what are you doing now?
So, I am probably not like most. I knew in high school that I actually wanted to go into ministry, and then went into college as a religion major, which I would tell people never in their life to do. Get like a real degree in something you can really use, because a religion degrey is not usable.
Oh man.
All. So I would not recommend a religion degree, though I will say that I really hate great professors and I loved my professors. So that was fun. But yeah, I knew from college or from high school that I wanted to do ministry. And then I realized in college that I really I worked with AIDS patients and did a lot of stuff with the AIDS Interfaith Network in Fort Worth. I went to school in Texas.
Yes.
And so that was a little different from what most of my friends were doing. And I just realized quickly that my heart was with those who have been marginalized.
Wow.
And so that's how I ended up kind of realizing where I ultimately wanted to go. My first call was actually to a church in Marietta, Georgia.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was a suburban church, a 750 members suburban church. So I thought I
Oh
was
my
taking
goodness.
kind of the easy route. And then 10 months into my call, my head of staff had a heart attack and died on a Saturday night.
Oh my goodness.
So my call wasn't the easy route that I thought it was going to be, but I learned a lot. And then after a few years there,
Okay.
discerning that maybe I should be moving on, I took a call up in Baltimore, and that's how I ended up here in Maryland. And
Wow.
I loved it. I loved living in the city. The reason I took the call to a church in the city was they said they had a heart for the people and really wanted to be were rooted in the city. And I realized quickly that that's what I wanted to do.
Oh
And so
wow,
my
that's
job
awesome.
then, over the years of working there, moved from being like an associate for like youth and Christian ed into being more focused on mission. And then I had this opportunity to have lunch or coffee actually with this guy, Jason Chestnut, who I was introduced to by another church member at the church I was serving. And we had coffee, and he's telling me about this new church community wants to plant or is thinking about planting. And I'm like, are you for real? Because that really intrigues me. And so I said, and
Wow.
there's one other person I think you should meet. She and I were also talking about something like around the same thing that you're talking about. So that's how Jason Chestnut, who's an ELCA pastor,
Oh
Sarah
wow.
Schisler Goff, who is an Episcopal priest, and myself, a
Wow.
Presbyterian, we all got together at the Diz and had crab dip and really started coming together and realizing that this might or could be a tri-denominational endeavor,
Wow.
thanks to an amazing grant by the
That,
ELCA and specifically an ELCA congregation here in Maryland or in Baltimore.
and was this something that you thought was, you know, was possible, or this blend of traditions and
So I
denominations?
knew that we were in full communion with Lutherans. Previous to this, the church that I was serving, we had a pretty good relationship with the Lutheran church down the street, which was the one that actually gave the grant to Jason.
I see.
The Episcopal church that was another block down from that. The Baptist church that was another block down from that. And then 2 or 3 more blocks down from there was a Catholic church.
Really? Oh
And
wow.
so our church was already doing some great stuff. I started doing I got us to join together and do a joint vacation Bible school, which we weren't doing,
Oh
and then starting
wow.
to do like a whole big MLK day of service. So
Yeah.
being like ecumenical was at the heart of a lot of the stuff that I was already doing, but I wasn't sure what the possibilities were when you bring 3 denominations together
Yeah.
when it comes to like money, like
Oh
bigger
right.
money, right? Bigger money. And when it comes to like theology, as well as like the practical of like the sacraments,
Yes.
and
Sure.
or like other things that kind of make it mucky, right? Or messy. Um,
Yeah,
but who
absolutely.
shies away from mess? Give me some mess. Give me some mess.
So this idea came out of like having coffee is well,
So
and
he, so
let's
yes,
backtrack a little bit.
uh-huh.
Tell me what you came up with the name of this ministry. Or have
So
we gotten to that point?
Yeah, so I didn't come up with the name. Actually,
Okay.
Jason totally came up with the name and kind of came up with uh, the kind of our premise of being online, being a
I
community
see.
that was going to be
Community online.
online.
Okay.
And so he was in a coffee shop, and he can tell the story much better than I,
That's okay.
because it's his story. But ultimately, he was at a coffee shop here in Charles Village, which is a neighborhood in Baltimore, and realized that while he was online, that everybody in that coffee shop was online. So this is summer of
Oh,
2013. And so
wow. Okay.
everybody was online, and he's like, "That's where I want my church to be." Uh,
Interesting.
and the name, the Slate Project, comes from him wanting to have, or us talking about having a clean slate.
Clean slate.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So slate is, this is something you know well if you live in the Guilford neighborhood, because they all have slate roofs.
I see.
Slate is imperfect in that it has impressions on it already. So we wanted to keep the impressions of Christ, right? That we are impressioned by Christ, but we wanted to like wipe off all the, that bad word.
Yeah.
We say Christianity without the crap. I hope I can say
Yeah.
that institutions have layered on for
Sure.
generations, and get rid of that and just going back to be a church of the 50s. And we're talking about like 50s CE, not 1950s.
Gotcha.
But really
Okay.
being a follower of a follower and disciple of Christ. And what would
Wow.
that look like?
And so given that idea,
Mm-hmm.
what came next?
So we started getting together and just praying. We prayed. We did Bible studies together, the three of us, in Jason's living room, and then at different coffee shops. And from there, we decided like we needed to do some open mics, some storytelling. Jason is a biblical storyteller.
Oh,
And
wow.
we realized that story and sharing story is really important. And so we did these
Absolutely.
open mics of sharing story. And then by the January of 2014, we felt like we were ready to like launch a worship service, a Monday night worship service. And St. Lydia's in New York City was doing this dinner church, which kind of fascinated us. So we took a visit up there and said, you know what, we really want to do something like that, for our in-person. And so in the beginning, our in-person dinner church really attracted a lot of highly educated pastors who weren't getting fed anywhere else. So they were coming to be fed because we were doing a Monday night. And then we also had this other segment of folks that were a little bit more on the in need side. And
Gotcha.
so we had this really interesting mismatch or craziness of being brought together. And that's kind of how Slate Project started.
And so, Jen, for those who aren't so familiar with the idea of dinner church, can you tell us about that? What is dinner church? What does that mean? What does that look like?
Well, so that in itself even actually changed. So in the beginning, we had one person who was being asked to cook and provide the meal for our folks. And as we got up to like 30 or so people, we realized that was getting more and more getting people stressed out. We tried to also be very welcoming of all folks. So we were trying to say gluten-free and meat-free. But then some of our folks who are more on the like food insecure and needed heartier meals weren't necessarily getting the type of food that they craved or needed. And so it became kind of a little difficulty, right? That was one of our first kind of growing edges of realizing we were stressing people out by asking them to provide a meal for 30 or 25. Right. Absolutely. If you're doing a soup, that's kind of easy, but doing the other things became a little bit harder. So then we went into more of a model of bring what you can.
Okay.
And that actually was a little bit more stressful for those of us who are organizing, right? Because we're always worried there's not going to be enough for everyone, right? So I was always kind of like, I'll maybe provide a meal for like 20, just to carry whatever might not happen. But what was amazing was the beauty in the bring what you can, so that everybody felt like they had something that they could bring or offer. So we had a guy who was walking to Breaking Bread. That's what we call our Monday night dinner church. He lived actually in like Waverly, and he was walking up, and that day he had nothing really to bring. But as he was walking, he found an ear of corn on the ground that was still in its husk. So he brought it and cooked it at the church, and we cut it into 7 pieces
Oh my
so
goodness.
that we like, and can you imagine like one ear being cut into like 7 pieces, so that it could be shared with the
Oh,
community. We've had folks bring 1 potato.
oh my
We've had
goodness.
folks bring like 1 can of like a small can of corn. You name it, it's probably been
Right.
brought.
Oh my
Like,
goodness.
and
So
then
it's
there's been,
sort of like the widow's mite kind of,
right, right.
in real life, right?
Right. So
Oh
bring
my
what you can.
goodness. Bring what
And
you
if you can't
can.
bring anything, just bring yourself.
Yes.
That's really what's needed. So it's kind of
Oh
based
my
off that
goodness.
one of our songs that we sang. We did a lot of music that makes community music.
Mm,
You familiar
okay.
with them? And one of the songs that we love in our community is "What You Need Is Here,"
Oh wow.
and it's based off of the Wendell Berry poem. And so like what we need is here. It's like we already have it, and we've been
Yeah.
blessed, and so let us share it with each other. You are
Oh
what
my
we need, I
goodness.
am what you need, let us just be together. So
Oh my goodness.
that's
And
just one part. Yeah, I mean, that Slate is interesting in the sense that we do a lot of things. So like our Monday night dinner, um which is one part of a multitude of things that we do.
wow. And so, what other kinds of things do you do?
So again, we are about educating or re-educating or sharing the gospel. We're very biblically based, in which some people kind of think that's kind of fascinating or weird. We just really are into the Bible. Like, for example, we do a Tuesday morning Bible study. We're right now on Genesis 43. We began at the beginning of the year with Genesis 1, and each week we
Wow.
study another chapter or a different
Chapter.
chapter.
Okay.
We go chapter
Wow.
by chapter. So when we study
Oh,
things, we don't like to just do those Bible studies where you get them in the like in a book,
yeah.
and they take like a chapter from this book and a chapter from this, and they kind of pull it together into like one theme. That's not kind of how we run with at Slate. We literally like to really study the text,
Oh, wow.
and get into it. So being very biblically based is one of our is kind of one of our I don't know, tenants. I don't know what you'd call that. But yeah, so studying the Bible and Bible study is one of our things. Also, just having real dialogue with misconceptions, things that are incorrect, and kind of transforming the narrative or the misnarrative in
Sure.
Christianity or of Christianity. We used to do these Welcome Wednesdays where we would correct misunderstandings, I guess, or tenets of the faith, misunderstandings of the tenets of the faith. So, like, Revelation, there is no S. Like things that were like simple, that really kind of took off on Facebook and Twitter, where people were really resharing. And that was getting us a ton of like publicity because folks were
Yeah.
just consistently like, yeah, sharing our material. And Your Welcome
Oh,
Wednesday kind of got a little old, so we, kind of now are changing things up and figuring out like what's next. How are we continuing to make things relevant, and also
sure.
keeping it fresh.
And who helps you in this process? Is it fair to say, as a pastor, you're part of the oh my goodness, I'm the theologian in residence. Are there other folks like that that serve or?
So what are you talking of? So on our staff,
Yeah.
it's like so funny saying, yeah, our staff of Slate Project. I mean, we're talking. So we're our budget is $47,000 for 2020, right? So
Wow.
like that's also probably something you want to chat about. So we have 2 part-time staff. So it's Jason and myself. We have
Gotcha.
musicians that play for our Tuesday morning Bible study as well as for our Monday night worship.
Yeah.
And then whatever else we get is kind of free will or gifted. because we don't own a building. We don't even rent a building. It's kind of borrowed space. Everything is borrowed space.
I was going to ask about that. So where do you convene? Where do you gather?
So we convene on Monday night at the Cathedral of the Incarnation. Okay. In free/borrowed space. Back in the beginning, we are actually on the Hopkins campus in their interfaith center. We ran into some difficulties there just solely on scheduling, because Mondays are a lot of holidays. There are a lot of holidays where buildings are closed on Mondays.
Oh my goodness.
Which, who would have thought that? But seriously, there's a lot of Monday holidays. Just sit there and think about that for a moment. And so we realized quickly, maybe that's, we're butting up against some scheduling things. So we moved to the cathedral, and there we also butted up against the cathedral would be closed on these Monday holidays as well. So what were we to do? And that's where it's been such a blessing to be trusted within the diocese. They gave us a key. They gave me a key and the key code to the diocesan center, which is kind of crazy. I mean, so not only has Bishop Sutton kind of signed off saying that he allows me each year to do communion in the Episcopal Church, but he also has given me a key to the diocesan center.
Oh, that's great.
Big cathedral. So it's been it's kind of surreal sometimes to think, wow, I'm glad he trusts me so much. And I don't know, for me, it's mildly cool. So.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that many people don't realize. Whenever we do, ministry that looks different than our traditional church setting, and that is all those little details, that factor into how we can and cannot do ministry. So even, borrowing a space and not being able to convene because of a holiday, that, I imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that was probably not something you guys had envisioned or thought of, when you were when this idea was germinating, right? That's not something you can plan ahead for.
Nope. Again, no idea. There's a lot of things when you do borrowed space, you just don't know. So Tuesday mornings, our borrowed space is in a Black-owned coffee shop.
Okay. So right? I visited you there. Mm-hmm. We've had coffee there. Yeah.
Right. They do coffee, and they do breakfast, and they do lunch, and Nancy by Snack on North Avenue. The best quiche, everything you can imagine. They're the best. You definitely hit it up. But even being in their borrowed space, and they're very gracious. Usually the week between Christmas and the New Year's, they're closed. Yeah, or the week of Thanksgiving, they're closed. Right. Or now with the mayor and of COVID and upping the restrictions, now even indoor and outdoor dining in Baltimore City is completely closed, right? Yeah. So how do you, if you don't have your own space and you're in borrowed space, even figure out how to meet? So COVID has even been a whole nother level of trying for us.
Yeah. So you have the difficulty in, let's say, normal times, pre-pandemic, of all these other nuances and details and logistics that you have to work out. And then you ramp it up with this pandemic. How has it been for you guys? How has it been for this community to deal with this issue?
Well, I think the nice thing about working with the population that we do, flexibility is something they're good at.
Yeah. Okay.
They're really flexible folks. And that's been a benefit for me. I used to be pretty A-type. I think I was pretty A-type up until when my head of staff died. I think that really helped me release some of it. But then as I got more into ministry and I realized you just don't know when you're going to call or something shit hits the fan. You can't plan that stuff, right? And so, that flexibility and being able to be flexible is the key to ministry, at least this type of ministry. And that's also the thing that keeps it fresh. right?
Sure.
Like for me, sitting in the same office day in and day out, that's not what I'm all about. I do like a little bit of drama. I'm going to be honest. I like a little bit of drama.
Oh, okay.
So it keeps me kind of going, but it also keeps me a little bit more creative. Because if everything is status quo and everything's going okay, then I'm not forced to be creative. And I think,
Sure.
I think that's what COVID has done for so many churches is it's forced us out of our safety of our buildings
Absolutely.
and really
Absolutely.
challenged us to think more creatively about how we can do worship and what is the church and the church being
Right.
people gathered and not solely a building.
And I think you hit on a big topic, a big point of emphasis is what is church? And, what does that look like? How would you define it in terms of your people
Mm.
group? How, Jen, how would you define church?
That's a really good question. I mean, again, anywhere that people are gathered. And that's why
Amen.
we find like our Thursday night with our Slate Speak Twitter conversations and group, we kind of call that church. Like
Oh, okay. So,
I mean, we
so
don't
you,
advertise it as, hey, you're coming to church.
sure, yeah, right.
But we say, what happens there is holy and sacred.
So what do you do there
So what do
on
they
those
do there?
Thursdays?
So
Yeah.
I think the best part about Slate Speak, and that would be kind of Jason runs that. So we've kind of split ministries up between us.
I see.
Jason heads up and finds our facilitators. But the best part about Slate Speak is it's a real online conversation on Twitter about modern topics with a Christian slant. Now you don't have to be a
Sure.
Christian, but oftentimes it does have more of a Judeo-Christian emphasis. And we have some just a real discussion or a dialogue about it. So a lot of the things we were talking about with Black Lives Matter, like pre-Freddie Gray, with Tyron Martin, with I guess
Trayvon Martin.
Trayvon Martin, and
Sure.
earlier violence on Black individuals. We were chatting about that online.
Wow.
But I think the thing with that, or how we've run Slate Speak, is that it's not just us. It's not just Jason or myself or earlier Sarah. We decided earlier on that we really needed to, in order for it to take off on Twitter, you have to have other leaders share it, because that way their followers can see it. So the more you share leadership on Twitter and on discussion groups, the bigger they can grow and the bigger the following. If you're just keeping it on, if you and I are just leading it, right, Jose, then it's only being seen by our followers. And and maybe a few of the followers that everyone else is, when they're responding back, they see the hashtag, right? But when you have leadership happening and rotating around, then more people are being touched, and you're more likely to talk about it. If you're leading something, you're more likely to talk about it. And I think that's kind of what's lent itself to the success of Slate Speak, is the moving around of the leadership.
Absolutely.
And maybe I think that should be a model. That should be a model for us as the church, right? And so often we look to the pastor to be the voice or to be the expert on faith or whatever, and we're not. We're one voice. We have one understanding of God, right? And so to share that, I think lifts up other voices, especially some of the voices that have been marginalized in the past.
Oh, that's incredible. That's so important in the context of community. When we think of church as community, the idea of community is that we're not uniform. Which is something that's fascinating to me, right? We don't all have to think the same way or believe the exact same thing. Rather, our strength comes in that diversity. But that doesn't exclude unity. We're still united. But diversity allows our different voices and perspectives and ideas to rise, to lift others, right? And so I love that idea. You guys do that through Twitter, which is amazing. You do that through a dinner church. all outside of the normal context of a church building. And we were talking earlier, and you said some of the issues that you guys have run into during this pandemic is things like living wages. And again, those little logistical things that we think of, even like trying to be good stewards with your resources, not using plastics to throw away. Some of that has changed. Can you tell me and talk a little bit about that?
So, that wasn't like one of our intentions wasn't to be a green church. But we realized really quickly that we were actually a green church, to provide a meal on real plates with real silverware, with real glasses, with real cloth napkins, with real tablecloths on a table.
Wow.
And sit down and have a hot meal, like, out of a big pot or passing it around. We have a big table that we can sit at, and passing it all around the big table really has a different feel for our folks, for some of our folks, than they've ever had before. Sometimes eating out of like disposable is all they've ever done, or going through a line and having to get it themselves, and then sitting down and eating maybe by themselves or with a smaller group of people, but really emphasizing being together and kind of eating it family style. I think contributes to the feel of being a part of the same community.
And family style takes on a different connotation in that context, right? Because you don't necessarily know everyone. I mean, the majority of people coming in, but if new people are coming in, but it's family and it's family style, then everyone's invited in, right?
Everybody's invited in. Yeah. And they're, and so, there's people that'll say, no, I don't like that. I don't want to try that. Like we had one guy who never had salad. He never, ever had salad in his life. And he started coming to, he calls it the breaking of the bread.
Nice.
They're coming to the breaking of the bread, and he started eating salad. Now, granted, he eats it with a lot of ranch. But he does eat salad. But we never forced it on him.
I don't blame him. I don't blame him. I mean, salad's not my go-to or favorite either.
Right. But during the pandemic, we've had to change that, right? So now it's a grab and go meal. I'm cooking in my kitchen at my house for everyone. And then they can just grab it and go, or we can sit socially distanced, pull up a curb or an extra chair if we have one. And we'll eat in a really big socially distanced circle right near Hopkins bus shuttle, because you can hear it. And try to have a conversation outdoors. Just because it's safer to be outdoors than it is to be indoors.
Sure, absolutely.
And while I want us to, well, now that it's getting colder, that's a whole nother
it's another layer, right?
A whole nother layer.
Oh my goodness.
But keeping our folks safe is definitely one of my number one priorities. Being fed is important, but safety by far is one of my most important things.
Wonderful. Jen, I just want to ask you a couple more questions. Can you tell us, what have been some of the highs and what have been some of the lows? What are the things where, as pastors, I often say we need to hold on to those little victories, those little things that mean more to us and are maybe those godly type moments. And then what are some of the low moments? Because the reality is that we all face those moments and deal with those. Could you tell us a little bit about those experiences?
That's so funny. So Jason, my current co-pastor, Sarah, has since moved on and took another call. But Jason would he'd probably say something completely different than what I would say, because I'm like the relational one. I'm like, I love people in relationships, and Jason we're just different. Which is great, that we can complement each other, especially now that he's moved. Actually, he lives West Coast now. We do ministry across the nation.
Oh my goodness.
So that's a whole nother.
He's on the coast and you're on this coast.
Yeah.
And you're still doing ministry. That's amazing.
Yeah, he moved during COVID. So it's been really kind of crazy when we meet with with the bishop's offices and the presbytery offices. Like we meet at 11 a.m., but that's really early for him. So,
Oh my goodness.
But anyway, so I would say for wins or things that I like to celebrate.
Yeah.
The fact that it's someone's birthday, and they tell it, I know it's their birthday. They choose to still be with us and come and be with us on their birthday, and that we're able to
that's amazing.
bring them a cake and celebrate and sing happy birthday. Just that type of stuff. Those are wins, and seeing just how excited they are that someone remembered and celebrated their birthday. And
cares for them in effect, right? When you celebrate someone's birthday, you're caring for them, right?
Right. So just that, because you kind of figure out when you know someone, you're like, right, you're having dinner next to somebody. So you're always chatting with different folks, and we try to change up where people sit. Sure. So you have a wide variety of who you're sitting next to and what you know. And so you find out like German Dutch cake is what he kind of likes, right? Or this person kind of likes pie instead of cake. And so when it does become their birthday, like you actually are able to give them something that they, probably really like. So that'd be one thing. The other wins are, we had a member in our community he's a violinist, and he had a hard time getting his license to play down at the harbor secured, and so I helped him get his license to play down at the harbor.
Oh my goodness!
And he had a friend, Ron, who was playing with him as well, and so they were able to come up and join us for dinner church. Right, this is great, and this guy's playing, his friend's playing, and everyone's playing, and the friend of the one who I helped get the license for, he really didn't have a guitar. He had borrowed one, but now his friend wasn't letting him borrow it anymore. And you know how things are, you can't really afford a guitar. And so Slate was able to help him get a guitar. And the best was just a couple of weeks ago, before it got cold, before it started getting cold and dark, they started riffing on Amazing Grace.
Oh my goodness.
So I whipped out my cell phone, and I just videoed the man on the violin just riffing away, and his friend playing the guitar and singing Amazing Grace. And then just being able to show that just a small snippet of it to our larger community, like those who have supported us as Slate sponsors, but then also to the offices of the bishops, right? So the diocese and the synod and the presbytery, to say like, this just happens. Like they just play and share, and it's been a real blessing. And just when things like that pop up, where you're just in a space and you realize, holy cow, like it was a lot of like little things that made this moment happen. And I was part of all those little moments that kind of made it kind of come together. And it's not about glorifying me, but it's just so cool as a pastor to see that, because you don't normally see things actually come about. Like you're doing a lot of this planting and but you don't actually see it kind of like sprout anything. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is a beautiful flower that just popped up from the cement.
That's amazing.
So yeah, so it that was kind of a beautiful moment. And then the harder parts. The harder parts are like letting go of things that you thought were going to be successful and like weren't. Right?
Like what do you mean? Yeah, give us an example of.
Oh yeah. An example of something you thought was going to be great and then just didn't. So like we've tried various we've tried a bunch of things. We tried some stuff online that just flopped. We tried some early on in the pandemic. We tried this like 10 a.m. I don't remember what morning it was, Tuesday or Friday morning, like, hey, come chat and hang out with us. And like, no one showed up.
No.
Nobody was like, I don't want to get on Zoom. I don't want to do anything. I don't need this. So it was like, no one showed up for that. We actually early on, when people were getting burned out from cooking dinner, actually suspended breaking bread.
Really?
Wondering if we were actually gonna
If you were
restart it or do it again.
right.
Because it was the same 6 people cooking over and over again. And we just realized that wasn't sustainable for them. And so what were we going to do, or how were we going to move forward? And that's when we realized, like, maybe you bring what you can, which when you do that, now is a whole different mentality of what you come with in the space. Because some folks they liked that when they came, that everything was done for them. Right? They liked that it was all done and prepared for them. And so now that when we asked them to bring something, that was another level of commitment. And for some, that was difficult. And they didn't want that.
That makes sense.
But for others, that felt kind of empowering that they were able to share. And if they didn't have anything to bring, then they came extra early and set the table, or stayed later and filled the dishwasher. So there are other things that people could do or just found themselves doing to contribute to the community. We had an issue where we didn't have, like, our room space was being utilized by this choir, this children's choir that was now inching into our time. And we had this well, what do we do? Do I tell them to get out of our space? We need to set up. And we ended up having this 10-year-old girl whose sister was in this choir. And I was in the kitchen cooking at like 5 o'clock because we start dinner at 6. And she said, "Oh, I like to cook. Can I help you cook?" And so pre-pandemic, she was one of our little chefs in residence, helping us cook and creating meals. So even what felt like a wall, right, like, ended up having like a door in it, right, and there was new opportunity and new relationship that was being built. But now I'm happy to say, well, sad and happy, like, so the diocese had a library, a bookstore that they that used to be run right out of like a space in their building. And unfortunately, they had to close. But I just learned yesterday that the diocese is actually giving us that room to use on Monday nights. So we're actually going to have our own little designated space that can kind of sort of be ours, where we can store our stuff in that room. Like that's a whole other thing. Where do you store your crap, right? Like, you have a building. Absolutely. Like, you can't have a lot of crap because you can't store it.
Again, those logistical details that you don't even really factor into, you don't think about, and you can't until you cross that bridge.
So that's where it says, that's where it's about simplicity, right? Like, we don't go over the top with decorating. We don't go over the top with anything, really. Everything is pretty simple. But I would say it's more than simple. I'd say it's authentic. When you walk into this space, you just feel like it's authentic, because what you see is what you get.
So, Jen, where can people find out more information about the Slate Project? What are some of the avenues where people can maybe find out more information, maybe support, maybe participate, find out more information about all that? Where would you send them?
Oh my gosh. So our best spots are probably Facebook and Twitter.
What do they look like? What do they search for?
The Slate Project.
The Slate Project.
The Slate Project. And you'll see like a picture that looks like kind of like the slate, a piece of slate. And that would be my 7-year-old.
That's awesome. And this is totally within keeping with the pandemic and Zoom. Hi, bud. Kids coming in, coworkers, and terrible lighting that all of a sudden escaped me. So we'll work on this, but I love this, Jen. Thank you for sharing your son with us. I'm surprised if mine weren't out right now, they'd be in the picture too. So, but anyway, keep going.
So yeah, the slateproject.org is also our website, which is under construction. We're about to get a new website that's going to be worked on, which is nice. But really, Facebook and Twitter. We're also on Instagram, but Slate Project.
Nice.
So Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Well, Jen, I just thank you so much. I'm so grateful to you for your time and sharing with us a little bit about what the Slate Project
No,
is.
thank you.
This has been really informative. I appreciate the perspective of learning what ministry can look like in a different context, right? And what effectively. And I love how you said that, ministry is community, and community is about people. It's about relationships, about being with people. And so if two or more are gathered, as scripture says, then there God will be, the Holy Spirit will be with us as well. And so what a great example for that. And I'm just so thankful for you for this conversation. I hope that maybe we can, as this podcast evolves and I get better lighting, we can work on some of this, and maybe we can have you on again sometime down the road.
Oh my
How does
gosh.
that sound?
I would love to talk about how it's not about the numbers, but it's about the transformation. Oh my gosh, so many things to talk about.
There's plenty more for us to talk about, and so we'll have you on again. But thanks again, Jen. I appreciate it.
You're
Appreciate your
welcome.
time, and I appreciate your son coming into the picture. That's awesome. Well, thank you again. I'm sure we'll talk soon. I appreciate it, and I look forward to hearing more about the Slate Project, and for all those who are able, support them in the wonderful ministry that they do.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jen, and we'll talk to you soon, okay?
Okay, bye-bye.
All right. Take care.